On our channel, we always say we'll show you the good and we'll show you the bad. This video is all about a really epic garden fail.
You don't want to miss this one.
There are a ton of bugs out here, so you will see us spot mosquitoes today. We've been working really tirelessly, honestly, on this garden for the last week and a half, I would say. And it's big. It's a 200 foot by 100 foot plot garden. It has everything from our tomatoes, our potatoes. There's some beans out here. There's all our winter squashes out here. We have an entire chili field, and we also stuck all our bell peppers and jalapenos and all of that out here. And there's a huge problem happening out here. So I guess we'll just get right into it. Our huge problem is boron. Boron is an element, and we have recently learned a lot about boron. So tell us about boron a little bit.
We bought this property because this is kind of the nice, lush part of the valley in the area we live in. And this is where we always wanted to end up. And looking out at all the farm fields around here, you don't see nice soil. Like, I don't know, I consider this good looking soil for the West, and no rock, you know, and not a rock to be found, to be honest, in this whole thing, in this whole area. And I don't know if we can pan around here to show you what we're talking about. This is what the hayfield looks like with zero irrigation, and that's what we turned our garden into.
That's what we pulled our garden out of.
Yeah,
it was a hayfield.
So anyway, we thought that buying a place out here was going to be easy to grow things. We had a house 3 miles away, approximately, that we moved into as our first house, and that's where we got our gardening addiction from. Soil looks similar, no rocks. You know, we moved in there. We never had a soil test done. Nothing, just planted a garden. Garden did great, absolutely phenomenal.
And much smaller and produced a lot of food.
Yep. And we had a neighbor that was a extremely good gardener, and he gave us good pointers and everything, and kind of kicked us off on where we got this obsession from. And then, so we moved again. Now we moved here because
we had a house in the middle that was laced with rock, but we could grow a lot of stuff there. And the stories about the grass isn't always greener on the other side, even though it literally is greener. But continue.
Anyway, we moved over there. We didn't like it. It was next to a bunch of gravel pits. Soil had very little organic matter in it, but we still grew good stuff in it. And anyway, we thought we'd come over here and it was going to be just easy peasy, you know, pop stuff in and it was just going to blow up. Anyway, I thought before we get our garden placement finalized, I better do a soil test. And so I came out here last winter, got a soil test done, sent it to our county extension agent. He got it and saw it and said that, boy, your boron levels are borderline toxic. And so if you plant anything in it and it doesn't germinate, or you plant anything and your leaves immediately turn yellow, that's a sign of boron toxicity. And he recommended maybe just planting a cover crop this year. And being the people that we are and trying to go real hard at this, we
ignored that a little bit.
We didn't like it. We didn't like that advice.
It wasn't worded super, I'm not saying anything negative, but it wasn't like, you need to do this. It was like, suggestion might be, you might want to plant a cover crop. So we were like, we don't really want to do that.
No, we didn't buy this property to not do anything with it. Yeah. And so, you know, to just plant something to cut down and turn into the soil, which, you know, long term is good. And I get it. I get cover crops and everything. But I thought, okay, well, we have tomatoes in the greenhouse. It's January. I'm going to pot some of them up into the soil that I take out of this space, and we'll grow them in that and see what they do. And I did that, and they grew fine. They looked great. They kept growing for, I don't know, a month or more. And then I gave them to some friends. They said they were fine. They did great. And anyway, long story short, we get to planting here. And I was confident that since those tomatoes did great, these tomatoes were going to do great.
They are not doing great. You can see them. We'll show you some close-ups in a minute.
Then we get to planting. We lay all our drip tape down, do all the weed matting, do all that stuff. It's a painstaking process. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort.
We actually have a video about it on our channel if you want to check it out, just to see how much work we're talking about.
We get our tomatoes in, we get our peppers in, get everything in, and about, I don't know, 3 days in, what do you say?
Yeah, it was like immediately. We just noticed a hue of yellow, especially in the tomatoes. And the tomatoes so we had potatoes planted out here, and then the tomatoes went in next. And you can't see potatoes what they're doing until they start to come up, which a couple have come up and they look that nice green color, but who knows what's going on in the ground. Anyway, so we put the tomatoes in. 2 or 3 days later, you look across the field and they're just like a hue of yellow, mostly in the lower leaves, and we're thinking, oh, they're transplanted plants, maybe they're root bound, maybe those are going to fall off anyways, or we should just prune those off and they'll get bright green growth on the top. That bright green growth didn't start to happen. It worsened a lot. And then we noticed some crisping leaves also happening, and we were kind of freaking out, like, what is going on?
We noticed even some stems were like turning off color and just snapping and basically dying at the stem on tomatoes and pepper plants. I don't know, I'd say maybe 20% of them had that, and it wasn't like a bug chewing through them or anything. Yeah, it was very toxic soil to be planting these plants into, I'd say. And went back and looked at the email that our county extension agent sent us back at last winter, and reread it and looked at the results. And
we started researching boron, and so our boron level that was on that report was 4.6 parts per million.
Yep.
Through the research I did, I found somewhere that said 0.7 was optimal. I found other things that said up to 1.5 parts per million, but at 4.6, we are way over that, and we definitely have a toxic level of boron happening in our soil. And boron is something that's important. Through our research, we also found it was hard to find things on boron toxicity, in my opinion, for you too. And we found a lot about how you need to add boron to your fields. You need to add boron to your garden because it's really important for flowers and for cell wall development, but not much on how it is so toxic. So that's kind of why we wanted to make this video, to just show you what happened to our garden so far. And at this point, we're kind of just like, we're not even coming out here to weed. Obviously, you can see weeds. It's kind of like, is it a wash, the whole thing? And we'll take you around here in a minute. So more on boron. Tell us more about it.
Boron is highly correlated with highly alkaline soils. So 7 is neutral, below 7 is acidic, and above 7 is alkaline. We are at 8.6. That's what our soil sample came back at here in this field, which is extremely alkaline. The alkalinity of seawater is 8.2, and so this is above that.
So it's like we're trying to grow in seawater.
In a seabed.
When he said that to me, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a huge factor to take into account.
That was a big red flag to me, and so I put a couple hundred, I think I put 100 pounds or 150 pounds of sulfur onto the soil to try to amend that a little bit. I mean, they say you can't bring your pH down with that, but it helps supposedly. So
from year to year, you have to do it every year.
Yeah, you have to do it a lot.
Is what we found.
When it's as extreme as this is, you have to do it a lot, and so it's up in the air on what to do. But adding sulfur helps. So I did that, and it's like liming an acidic soil, like a lot of people in the East have to spread lime. Anyway, our area here, the western U.S. in general, was all under the ocean at one point, like Salt Lake City. That was all like the last remnants of a inland ocean. And as that drained away, that sediment on the ground, and so we have a very deep sediment layer, which is good. I mean, there's not a lot of rock, and it's high. We have really high organic matter here, but pH is just very skewed. And looking at it beforehand when we bought the property and dreaming about living out here, we thought, how can you go wrong? But
yeah, and we were just originally 3 miles away from this, so this is just a little bit lower in the valley, we think, and a little bit more where all that would have settled, so long ago in history. And now we're at a point we're at where we have a property that there's a lot of boron, and the soils are not what we thought they were. Yeah.
And yeah, we don't want to cover crop because we don't want to waste our time growing.
But we might cover. We're thinking about it. So this video, we're also wanting suggestions. If you have suggestions, please let us know.
If
it's
really worth our time, then we would do it. But what we've seen so far is that leaching may be a better option depending on our water source. We need to get our pH tested on our water sources, get the boron levels tested on that if we can, and then just don't pour the water to it and just try to leach it out, because boron can be leached through the soil. We have a ditch that runs along our property that we can irrigate off of. We can pump easily 300 gallons a minute with our little ditch pump off of that. But everybody around us, a lot of people around us are commercial egg producers that have big egg fields that they spray, I'm sure, with herbicides. And if they spray too much or whatever and we get runoff in there, we don't want to spray that herbicide onto our field. And the extension agent told me that you can't test for herbicides. And so that would be a big gamble. We've had problems in the past with
poisoning our ground with
herbicide.
Not our own herbicide, somebody else's.
Yep.
From hay and manure and all of that. So like we said, we put the plants in and we noticed pretty much immediately a couple days later what had happened. Here's our next little surprise on our epic garden fail. Last night we got frost. So today is June 13th and last night it frosted, the night of June 12th, and all of these tomatoes for the most part are dead with frost right now. So, we're kind of believers a little bit and things happen for a reason. And if we would have come out this morning to frost on our gorgeous tomato plants, we'd have been so upset. So this kind of eased us into a little bit, not optimal because we still need to work on this soil and make it better, but it's kind of like, this is what you get when you're growing stuff. So something else that we did when we noticed these plants were yellowing is, this is not our only garden. This was going to be like our market garden that we were going to sell most of this stuff, but a portion of it we were going to keep for ourselves, like those potatoes. Like I'm really hoping those pull through, and a bunch of the winter squash and stuff just for the winter and long-term food storage. But anyways, so when we noticed that yellowing, we did come out here and we pulled a handful of tomatoes, I think 30 different tomatoes, and we just pulled our varieties that are our favorite, really.
Heavy producers.
Yeah, heavy producers that we want to make sauces and, to make all the things for ourselves this winter. And then we also pulled a bunch of winter squash and put them down in the other garden, and that other garden was going to be different than it is now. I'm glad we planted in this order so we could see, and now we filled it in down there. And hopefully we have enough to be happy with our harvest this year from down there. But since the soil is what it is up here, we're not really sure what to expect down there. So far, plants look better, and it is the garden that the previous homeowners did use. So, they've grown in it, they've been adding to it, they've been doing this and that. So hopefully we're off to a good start down there. But it was kind of nice to just be able to pull some of these plants, and I'm really glad we did, especially since it frosted up here. It kind of frosted down there, but not nearly as bad. It's a little bit more protected, and the frost didn't happen to settle there last night, which some nights it probably will settle there.
The home garden is closer to the ditch, so it might give it a little thermal barrier with the warm water flowing right there. We did have another soil test done down where I'm growing corn, and it had high nitrogen levels because the previous owners had sheep and goats in on it. So we strayed away from planting our tomatoes and stuff down there because we've had problems with high nitrogen before.
In our tomatoes,
specifically. And the boron levels were like 3-something parts per million, which is better. When I talked to the county extension agent here recently about it, he said that there's like a wide variance in boron level acceptability, and there's not like a stark cutoff. It's like,
yeah, like I was saying, a stark cutoff, really.
Yeah, he said like 3 parts to 6 parts is considered toxic, and 2 parts to 4 parts is considered okay.
Not okay, though.
Yeah.
For us, it's not okay. And who knows, the soil sample you pulled, maybe it was light on boron compared to other places in this garden.
Right, yeah, that's another point that I meant to touch on is it's probably pretty variable throughout this garden because like some tomatoes were doing all right, and some were just getting crushed and not even surviving. And that's kind of what I expect happened with that little potting up experiment I did last winter. Is I pulled some soil out of a spot that didn't have super high levels of it.
It must be.
That's my guess. Yeah. And just got lucky, and the rest, some of the garden is real high, some of the garden's not so high, and so it's just not uniform. So our plan going ahead, unless we get a better idea from some of our viewers or maybe an agronomist is watching right now and will give us a definite answer.
Please tell us what to do.
We're planning on just trying to leach it out, test our water sources and just try to leach it out.
Yep, so let's show you around. We're going to lose sunlight, I think. So these are pathetic tomato plants that were frosted. And you can't even tell that it had boron toxicity at this point because it is frosted at this point. I will try to find one that it didn't get frosted last night, though, and you can see a little bit better. So this one is not that bad compared to some of them that we had, but you can see like these leaves are, sorry, I just planted onions, so my hands are full of dirt, but these leaves have little brown spots where they're crisping up, and it's not the right color. It's yellow towards the bottom. This must actually be kind of a good spot, but it just doesn't look good like it should coming out of the greenhouse and getting planted in the garden. I was actually referencing one of our videos from last year just to see what our plants look like right after we planted, and this is nowhere near the color, so not good. Let's find another one. Okay, so here's another one. This was a variety I really wanted to try. It's black strawberry tomato, but do you see how that just shriveled up and died? Looking into boron, something we've learned is that when the plant sucks up the nutrients, it's bringing that to the end of the leaves, and that's why they kind of die at the end because it has nowhere further to go. And that's what we had been seeing. Now, this color of this plant being a black strawberry, it was a little darker anyways, but we did also notice some of the plants seem to be turning kind of like black on the stems, which was kind of weird. So bad. It's just so bad. Okay. So this one, imagine it being alive because it got frosted, but this is what we saw. The stem just broke pretty much and wilted over. Kind of crazy. We saw this same thing on a bunch of peppers, which we'll go show you a little bit of those in a minute. In this garden for tomatoes, we had about 230 tomato plants in here that are just done. And we did save those 30 about, so at least there's something. We planted a row of peanuts here as kind of an experiment. They look fine so far. They look still a nice green color. We'll see how they handle the boron. So they're a legume, and legumes do better in boron as far as what we've read, so hopefully they should do fine. Okay, over here we are onto the chili / pepper field. There are 1,016 chili plants in this field, and 2 full rows, so about 200 plants of like jalapenos and bell peppers and banana peppers, those types of things. Those are all on the far end. These look much better, and these did not get frosted, and I'm kind of thinking they possibly didn't get frosted either because they're in better shape anyways from the boron levels, and maybe this black mat saved them. This weed mat might have saved them from the frost, and they're substantially smaller. So any of those reasons could be why they didn't really get frosted. Here is a frosted one right here. I mean, you can see it's a frosted plant. It might actually still pop back and live. Here is one that has a little bit of that boron toxicity going on in it. Growing up, killed over, and died. So we've been seeing it somewhat with the peppers and chilies, but not nearly as bad as the tomatoes.
Here's a plant that seems to be showing signs of that boron toxicity. So where the stem just kind of withered up and died, and then the plant tipped over. Here's another one. Here's another one.
So this is our strawberry patch, and there's about 500 plants over here. And these we were planning on just letting them go the first year and taking those runners and transplanting them over there into that like empty patch that now has a bunch of alfalfa coming up in it. And they are really small, and they have a ton of flowers for how many leaves they have. I mean, this thing has 2 leaves and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 flowers. That doesn't seem quite right, but I'm not a strawberry farmer by any means, so if someone can tell me about strawberries and what to expect, please let me know, because this doesn't seem quite right. And I know that strawberries, according to the things I researched, they require a little bit more boron, but some of the strawberry people that do farm them, they could overdo it. This field went in first, and it was about a month before everything else went in, and I wish we would have noticed something going on here sooner so that we could have not put all our plants out there, but live and learn, and when you're in a new place, you're trying new things. So back beyond, we have 400-foot rows of potatoes. Let's go look at those. Here we are in the first 400-foot rows of potatoes, and we have some potatoes coming up. These tubers, when they went in, they were really small and they weren't eyeing out that much. So I think that's why they're a little bit behind. Like I said earlier, we haven't even really come out here to weed anything because we don't know if it's worth it. We don't know if this whole field's a wash, and we don't want to spend our time weeding something we're not going to end up getting anything out of. So excuse all the weeds, but they're coming up a little bit. On the other side, over here, we have 4 more 100-foot rows of potatoes, and these ones are coming up a little bit more. These eyes were really eyed out, and they were a lot bigger, so they seem to be producing a little bit more. So that's 800 feet of potatoes. We are really worried that we're not going to be able to have those because we keep those all winter long. Those are a staple for us. So we're really hoping that the boron levels in this part of the field or in that part of the field where the 2 potatoes are, because they're separated, that they're okay and that we will end up getting potatoes out of here, because John spent a lot of time digging these also and putting these potatoes in. Over to the side over here, we have our winter squash, and the winter squash, I did come pull a bunch out. So you see all the empty plugs, but the winter squash also experienced quite a bit of frost last night. So they kind of look like junk anyways. And some of the ones that I transplanted also have that going on, but it seemed to be more protected down there. And as far as the boron levels in this, where we were going to have all our winter squash, like delicata, marigold, spaghetti squash, all of those, they looked decent. These plants looked decent. We did notice a little bit of that leaf browning, crisping going on, but not super bad. This leaf is also a little bit yellow compared to what we would like to see. So, yeah, that's where we are. Here's our epic garden fail for 2024. This is going to be one for us to remember personally. If anybody has any suggestions of how to deal with alkaline soils and with this boron level, please leave it in the comments. We would be eager to read those. And we told you we would tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is definitely the bad and the ugly. So stay tuned if you want to see if this garden ends up pulling through. And we do also have the other garden that's 80 by 60 and the big cornfield. So, oh, and we also planted tomatoes in the greenhouse. And, you know, John and I were kind of freaking out, looking around and thinking, oh, we're not going to have any tomatoes. I counted them, and we have 100 tomato plants still. So we should be good, but it's going to be a different means of growing the tomatoes in the greenhouse, being they're all going to be pruned and everything. So we'll see what we get out of that. That's kind of just something we've never really done. We always just kind of let them go and grow. But anyways, thanks for checking out this video. If you have any feedback, please leave it in the comments, and we'll see you on the next one.